the SEC meetings are ongoing over in Destin, and I led the show talking about the proposed amendments to scheduling and then to the college football playoff that are being kicked around over there in the Destin sand. But one thing that did come out of the meetings was Scott Rabelais chatting with Brian Kelly. And Scott Rabelais of The Advocate, who joins the guys on Live at Lunch every week and does an awesome job for the paper, asked Brian Kelly about Whit Weeks and Harold Perkins. We all know that Harold Perkins tore his ACL in the UCLA game, and then Whit Weeks was carted off the field in the bowl game. And those two guys are pretty important to the LSU defense, if you hadn't heard. And Brian Kelly said both guys are 100% clear. They're ready to do all offseason conditioning, and they'll be full throttle for fall camp. And that is not breaking news, but it's good to hear, right? Because you look at LSU's roster, specifically on the defense for the purposes of this conversation, and you look at the defensive line with Jamari Butler and Jack Pyburn, and you also added on the defensive end Patrick Payton, and then you go to Sadir Mitchell on the interior, and then you go back to the secondary, and you got Mansour Delane and Tamarcus Cooley and Jakeem Jackson, and like you brought in a ton of guys all over the defense, except at linebacker. Because I think the feeling is LSU is set up at linebacker. Greg Penn was a great leader for LSU, and he was a productive player statistically. Was he an all-conference player? He was not. Was he a high draft pick? He was not. Whit Weeks is seriously productive, is an all-conference level player, and Harold Perkins is a potential high draft pick. Now, they got to find a spot for him, but those two guys check some more boxes than Greg Penn did. And then you add in Devon Keys and what they asked him to do late in the season last year, which he did very well. Played a little bit at the nickel slot, played a little bit on the inside, played a lot of snaps in the bowl game when Weeks went down. That's a guy they feel very good about in his second year in the defense. And then West Weeks came back, which you didn't know if you were going to get as of Thanksgiving. He kind of wanted a red shirt, and then you got it across to him that, hey, if you stay, like, you are going to play, and Zach Weeks is going to come, and you can play with your very much younger brother. And it created an awesome opportunity for him, but it also really bolstered LSU's high-end depth at the linebacker spot. And I think that linebacker is really looking good for LSU in this 2025 offseason. I think that there are significant questions about how well LSU rushes the passer, significant questions about how well LSU covers man-to-man, significant questions about whether or not the safety play can get to the level that Brian Kelly has asked it to get to for now over a year. I don't have big questions about linebacker. Like, the questions I have are, how often does Harold Perkins line up here, and how often does he line up here? How often is he asked to do this? How often is he asked to do that? Is he covering more? Is he rushing the passer more? Is he playing on the inside more? But they're not like, do we have anybody that's really good on this unit? Like, that's not the question. Whit Weeks was second in the conference in tackles last year. Devon Keys was probably LSU's best freshman defender last year. And then Perkins is going to impact the game positively. I got way too many questions last year when Perkins went down and LSU started playing a little bit better against Ole Miss and playing a little bit better against Arkansas and playing a little bit better in some of those games. Like, well, is the defense better without Perkins? No, the defense is not better without Harold Perkins on the field. The defense is better when Harold Perkins is on the field and doing the things he's really good at. One of the things he's not really good at is playing right in the middle of the field on the hash, reacting to plays, getting onto the blocks of offensive guards, and shedding them to go make tackles. He's not really good at that. What he is really good at is getting up the field in pass rush and blitz situations and playing out in space, sometimes in coverage. He's really good at those two things. And he's better than anybody else they try to put in that role at that combination of things. Now, you can't spend the entire year with Harold Perkins on the edge of the line of scrimmage, flying up there trying to rush the passer and catching offensive tackles when the other team decides to run. you have to vary his role a little bit. But he can play that role and use that versatility better than anybody else you've got on the roster. So no, you don't get any better when Harold Perkins is not on the field. And Whit Weeks wasn't perfect last year. There were some plays where he didn't quite fill his assignment properly. One comes up at South Carolina. And it wasn't perfect, but it was his first year as a starter. We all loved the way he played 2 years ago, like a man with his hair on fire, but like he didn't play as much as we probably thought he should. And then it was his first year as a full-time starter last year. Now he's a seasoned vet. Now he's got a year under his belt. Now he knows how fast the game moves. Now he knows how long a season is. And he could lead the league in tackles. It would surprise no one if Whit Weeks led the SEC in tackles. And then Devon Keys, who I think is going to have a really nice year. Because they're not going to ask Devon Keys to be a stalwart middle linebacker who makes 105 stops. They're going to ask Devon Keys to complement the other two dynamic players right next to him. And I think he showed in November of last year that he's capable of doing that. So I'm hoping that LSU is, I think it's fair to say, significantly improved on defense this coming year. I'm hoping that. Expecting is probably too big a word, but I will tell you that where I can speak kind of definitively is that I have less question marks personally about LSU's second level of the defense than I do the first or the third. I think you've got the guys you need. I think you're going to put them in the positions you need to. We've had this Perkins conversation for 3 years. We'll have it one more time. Weeks has probably got 1 year left. And then Keys is hopefully blossoming into an all-league type player. And that is the nucleus of the middle of your defense that you can use to your advantage. Hopefully, you've solved some issues in coverage. Very much hopefully, you've solved your issues at safety. And hopefully, the blend of defensive front players that you've brought in and used to complement the guys that were already here is a really, really good unit. But at linebacker, I just don't have a lot of questions. I think LSU is going to be really good at linebacker. And it's great to hear from Destin that Harold Perkins and Whit Weeks are going to be out there the second the team breaks for summer workouts, and they're going to be out there kind of leading the charge. You heard Blake Baker say last week with Jacob Hester that, like, Perk's one of the leaders, and you know that Whit Weeks is. The defense needs those guys. They need them out there in the summer, and they're going to get them based on what Brian Kelly told Scott Rabelais earlier today in Destin. So very, very good stuff there from the beaches of the Florida Panhandle. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.